Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we're wrapping up our Sporty set. This time, it's all about the shorts. For these shorts, we kept with the Sporty theme, going with some white piping, gave them a fun and flirty cut, and used the mesh stitch because it sort of resembles a jersey, plus it's breathable. All the ingredients for sporty attire. Speaking of, if you're looking for more sporty wearables, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of crochet tutorials and patterns, including some sporty, with more dropping weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 130 grams of yarn, and that's 285 yards if you're stateside, and the individual measurements will be on the screen. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you prefer a yarn cake or a ball. I'm partial to yarn cakes because I don't like my yarn gallivanting around the room, but I currently have more yarn balls at the moment. Details for the giveaway down below. We are using 2 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, and single crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we'll explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting these shorts started, we're all going to grab our secondary category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook and start off by making a chain the height that we'd like for the waistband to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making chain 10. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that is our turning chain. And into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops on our hook. Again, into that next chain, insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both. And that's it. We're going to continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly, otherwise the following row can be a little too tight to work into. We've made our way down to the end of our row 1. Now let's get started on our row 2, which is going to be more slip stitches but within the back loops. So we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. We're all going to start by finding that last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop, then again yarn over, pull through everything. Let's do that again. Into that next available stitch, we're going to insert our hook into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over and pull through everything. And continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's basically it for the waistband. At the end of the row, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. We're just going to continue to repeat this row with absolutely no increases and no decreases until we have a waistband that can stretch, remembering that this does have a decent amount of stretch to it, around the widest part of our hips. And it does need to end on an even number in multiples of 4. I'll meet you guys back once we have this waistband portion all finished up. Alrighty, so we are back. We have just finished up the width of our waistband. I have a total of 120 rows, and my width is roughly 19.5 inches or 50 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, what we're going to do is do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, making sure that our work isn't twisted. Then what we're going to do from here is yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and let's do the first seam. We're all going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. And then we're all going to start by finding that next available stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. When we have all 3 of those loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, and pull through everything. And continue with this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And we're doing this seam so that it looks like another back loop slip stitch row, but it will not actually count as a row, it's just our seam. So now that our seam is all finished up, we're ready to single crochet along the edge of our waistband. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 1 and put 1 single crochet into every side row. So we're all going to start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here, which is this divot. I'm just going to find that top loop, insert my hook, and if you're like me, you have a tail end, go ahead and just place that over your hook if you don't want to weave it in later, and single crochet around everything. Let's do this again. Into that next side row, which is this raised row for me, find that top loop, insert your hook with a single crochet. Let's do this again. Everyone's following side row should be this divot, so find that top loop, insert your hook with 1 single, and then everyone's following side row is this raised row, so find that top loop and insert with another single. And continue doing this, making our way all the way around. Now 2 really quick tips. We should end up with the same amount of side rows that we made for the waistband, so for me 120 single crochets, and also this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once we made our way all the way around and then slip stitched into that chain space, try on your piece, making sure that it's not too tight. If it is a little bit too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. Then do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so we are back. Our single crochet row along the edge of our waistband is all finished, and we did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now from here we're going to do yet another single crochet row, but that's just to prep for the length of the shorts, and it's going to be with our primary color yarn. So all we're going to do is insert our hook into any one of the stitches that we have into the single crochet row that we just did. We're going to insert our secondary color yarn onto our hook and just put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now we should have the same amount of single crochets as rows that we made for the waistband, so for me it's going to be 120 single crochets again, and then I'll meet you guys back. Alrighty, so we are back. We have just finished up our single crochet row with our primary color yarn, and now we're going to insert some stitch markers so that we know where we're going to separate the right from the left pant leg, and also for our side details. So we're all going to start by splitting our shorts down the middle. So first things first, we're all going to insert our stitch markers into the stitches that we have on either side of our tail end. From there, we're all going to take the amount of single crochets that we have. Now that should be the same amount of rows that we made for the waistband, and cut that in half. And then once we have that half number, we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into those 2 middle stitches. Now we should all have 2 middle stitches because we should have all ended on an even number. For those of you that had my numbers, I had a total of 120 single crochets. So after inserting my stitch marker into the 2 stitches nearest to my tail end, I also counted out 60 because that's the half number on both sides, and inserted my stitch markers into there as well. Now we should have the same amount of stitches from stitch marker to stitch marker. From there, we're going to insert our stitch markers for the side detail, so let's look at that. Alright, so we got a lot of stitch markers going on, but we're going to start by focusing on the baby blue stitch markers, which are the middle stitches or the center stitches. Now, just to let you guys know, if you had an even number, when you split your single crochets in half, you will have 2 middle stitches. If you had an odd number, when you split your single crochets in half, you will have 1 middle stitch. Both of them are completely fine. So I have 2 middle stitches. So I just inserted my stitch marker into my 30th and 31st stitch. Those are my 2 middle ones. And then right after that, we're going to be inserting our next stitch markers into the stitches away from our center stitch markers, the width that we like for our side detail to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters. So all I did was counted out from that middle stitch a total of 6 stitches to the left and 6 stitches to the right. We want to make sure that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides because we don't want the front and the back of our shorts to be wonky and uneven. Now for those of you that had 1 middle stitch in between your pant legs, you guys will have an odd number of stitches. For your side detail, that's completely fine. And for those of you that had 2 middle stitches, we will have an even number of stitches for our side detail. That's completely fine as well. But once we have the width of our side detail all figured out, the next thing that everyone is going to do, now this portion is going to be the same for every single size, we're all going to insert our stitch marker into the 5th stitch away from our side detail stitch markers. Now it needs to be into the 5th away for everyone, because from this stitch marker over to our side detail stitch marker, this is going to be where our shorts are going to start to curve up to reach the side detail. And like I said, it's going to be 5 stitches for everyone. Once we have all of these stitch markers into place, we're going to do the same thing on the other side, making sure that everything is nice and even, and then we can get started on the length of our shorts. So now that we have just finished up inserting our stitch markers, we're now ready to get started on the length of our shorts. So keeping in mind that we are going to be working on the inside of the length of the shorts, so not the side, we're all going to make an odd number chain the length that we'd like for our shorts to be, keeping in mind that it does need to be at least 1 inch past where the middle connector is going to be. And making sure we're placing our waistband where we want it to fit when it's finished, so high-waisted, mid-rise, or low-rise. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into our middle stitch marker stitch that's nearest to the tail end. Now you can insert it into any one of them, it doesn't quite matter. And I'm going to start by making a chain that is 6.5 inches or 16 centimeters, and that's a chain of 27 for me. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a single crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with 1 single crochet. And that's it. Continue with 1 single crochet into every chain, and I'll meet you back at the base. Alright, so we've just made our way all the way down with our single crochet row. Now we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So just finding that next available stitch, we're all going to insert, yarn over, and pull through everything with a slip stitch, and that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, that's just to connect our row 1. Now let's get started on our following row. We do need to work our way up to that next row, so slip stitch into that following stitch into the base as well. Now none of those slip stitches count as a stitch, and we're going to get started on the following row. Now for the main portion of the shorts, it's going to be a 3-row repeat, which is a single crochet and 2 mesh stitch rows right after that. So after our 2 slip stitches into the base, let's all flip our work. Now that our work is flipped, we're all going to start by inserting 1 single crochet into that last stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches. Insert with a single, then chain 1, skip a stitch, and into the next, another single crochet. Now all together we should have a single crochet, a chain space, and a single crochet, so far 3 stitches for this row. Let's do this again. Chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet, and that's it. Continue doing this until you reach the end of the row. Alright, so we are back. We have just made our way all the way down with our second row, which was our mesh stitch row. Our following row is going to be yet another mesh stitch row, so from where we're at, let's all chain 1 and flip our work. Now whenever we're getting started on a mesh stitch row, but we're along the outer edge, we're always going to single crochet into that first stitch, chain 1, skip a stitch, which should be a chain space from our previous row, and into that next stitch, a single crochet. Altogether, we should have a single crochet, a chain space, and a single crochet, so far 3 stitches for this row. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, which is our chain space, and single crochet into the next. Now continue this until we reach the base. Alright, so we are back. We have rows 1, 2, and 3 all finished up. We now just need to connect our row 3 into the base. Now connecting our row 3 is going to be the same way that we connected our previous row. So we should all be worked into that last stitch and just find that next available stitch into the base. We're going to insert into that next available stitch, yarn over, and pull through everything with a slip stitch. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. And then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. That slip stitch also does not count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now like I said in one of our previous clips, it is going to be a 3-row repeat, so a single crochet and then 2 mesh stitch rows right after that. Now as a really quick tip, since this is a 3-row repeat and that is an odd number, sometimes our single crochet row is going to start along the outer edge like our first one, or you can get started along the base just like how this one is. But no matter what, for this portion until we reach our following stitch marker, we are not going to have any increases or decreases, so it's going to be fairly simple. Just getting started on the single crochet row that starts along the base, find that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches, and insert with a single into that next stitch, which is a chain space with a single. We're just going to continue to repeat these rows, making sure that we're connecting it into the base the same way that we just did, and then I'll meet you guys back once we reach our following stitch marker stitch so we can start to work on the curve of our shorts. Alrighty guys, we are back. We have just finished up the main portion of the shorts, so that's where the center of the shorts are, over to where we have our curve stitch marker stitch. Now for the following 5 rows, we will be doing the same row sequence, but with a decrease along the outer edge so that we get a nice curve that leads up to the side of our shorts to elongate the side of our legs. Now our following row is going to be different for everyone depending on where you ended. I'm going to be doing my following rows, but the instructions will be pretty much the same. You guys just go ahead and implement them with whatever row you're currently working on. So I have actually ended right after my second mesh stitch row along the outer edge. So my following row is going to be a single crochet row. And since we are along the outer edge, we're going to start that with a decrease of 3 single crochets. So I'm going to chain 1 and flip my work. Now to do our single crochet row that starts along the outer edge, we're all going to insert our hook into that first stitch, pull through, into that next stitch, pull through, and then into that following stitch, pull through, and that is a decrease of 3 single crochets. Now all together we're going to yarn over, pull through all 4 of those loops, and then from here put 1 single crochet into every stitch until we reach the end of the row. And since we are working up towards the base, we are going to slip stitch it into the base the same way that we normally would as well. Alright, so we are back. I have just finished up my single crochet row that started with a decrease of 3. I've connected it into the base the same way that we normally would and have worked my way up to the following stitch as well so that we can get started on the following row. Now my following row is going to be a mesh stitch row that starts along the base. So what that is going to be is our regular mesh stitches all the way down but leaving the last 4 stitches. So to get started on this following row, we're going to single crochet into that first stitch, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next. I will meet you back when we all have 4 stitches left. So we have just made our way all the way down with our mesh stitch row that started at the base. We did our mesh stitch all the way down, leaving the last 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Now I'm going to show you how to end off this row. So right after that single crochet, what we're all going to do is chain 1, skip a stitch, and then into that following stitch, which is the third to last, insert, pull through, into the stitch right after that, which is the second to last, pull through, and then into that last stitch, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 4, and that is the end of this moss stitch row. Now my following row is going to be yet another moss stitch row, but ends along the outer edge. So what we're going to do for that row is chain 1 and flip our work. And since we are along the outer edge, we're going to start it with a decrease of 3 single crochets again. So into that first stitch, pull through, into that next stitch, pull through, and into that next, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 4. Then to do our mesh stitch row, we're all going to chain 1, skip that following stitch, and then into the next, a single crochet. And from here on out, the mesh stitch is going to be per usual, so continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet. And continue this to reach the end of the row, connecting it into the base the same way that we just did. Alrighty, so this mesh stitch row is all finished up. My following row is going to be a single crochet row that starts along the base. So I've already worked my way up to the following row from the base. Then all we're going to do from here is flip our work and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches, and then I'll meet you back to do our decrease once more. So our single crochet row that started along the base is nearly finished. We put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 1, 2, 3 stitches, and now we're going to close off the row with a decrease of 3 singles. So into that third to last stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, and then into that last stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4. And those 4 rows that I just showed you are the 4 row variants that we could have when we're doing the decrease portion of our shorts. So we're just going to continue to do our decrease rows, and I'll meet you guys back once we're worked into the stitch right before our following stitch marker stitch. Alrighty, so I am back. I have just finished up my 5 curve rows for my shorts. Now from here, we're just going to single crochet along the outer edge to clean it up, and then we're going to repeat everything we did here on all of the other 3 sides. So this is going to be a little bit different depending on whether if you guys ended along the base or along the outer edge. Now, for those of you that ended along the outer edge, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then you're going to insert your hook into that same stitch that our last row is worked into within the base. For those of you that ended at the base, all we're going to do is flip our work, and then we're going to put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then I'll meet you back so we can start working into the side rows. Alright, so we've just made our way all the way down with our single crochets, and now we're going to put 2 single crochets into every side row for just the decrease rows. But right before we get started on that, we're all going to want to make sure we're inserting our stitch marker into that last single crochet that we have. So from the base to where we just insert our stitch marker, we should have the same amount of stitches as our last row. Now from here, we're going to find our first side row and do 2 single crochets into that top loop. So this is my first side row right here. That's where my decrease is. If it's a little hard to tell, it's this little cluster right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 singles. So there's 1, there's 2. This cluster is my following side row, so find any top loop into there, insert with 2 singles, there's 1, there's 2, and we're just going to continue doing this until we're worked into all 5 of our curve rows. So since we all have 5 curve rows, we should all have a total of 10 single crochets. Alright, so we just worked into our curve rows from this first stitch right over here to our last one. Since we all did a total of 5 curve rows, we should all have 10 single crochets right here. Then from here, we're just going to work our way across the bottom of our shorts, putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So just to do the first one, this is my first side row right here. Insert into that top loop with a single. This is my following side row, insert into that top loop with a single again. And just continue this until we reach our inner corner right over here. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so single crocheting along the edge of one side of our shorts is all finished up. Now we're just going to repeat everything we just did here on the 3 other sides that we have. So just start by inserting your hook into that following middle stitch marker stitch, and then repeat, starting with the length. I'll meet you back when we have a total of 4 of these panels all finished up, and then I'll meet you back so we can get started on the side panel. Alrighty, so we are back. We have just finished up all of the panels that we have for our shorts, so we should have 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to start working on the side panel. So I did fold my work in half so that we're now working at the available chunk that's in between our shorts. And we're all going to start by inserting our same 5.5mm hook into our following stitch, which is our side panel stitch marker stitch. Now our side panel is going to be done pretty much the same way that we did the first portion of our shorts, so the non-decrease portion. We're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches as our last curve row for our shorts. Or if you forgot what that number is, it should be the amount of stitches that we have from this first stitch all the way over to our stitch marker stitch, since we did insert our stitch markers into that last stitch. So for me, it's going to be 17. Then all we're going to do is a repeat of the first half of our shorts. So a single crochet row, 2 mesh stitch rows, a single crochet row, and then so on and so forth until we don't have any more stitches left for our side panel. So when we're worked into that last stitch marker stitch. This portion isn't going to have any increases or decreases, so once we don't have any more stitches left to work into, just do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alrighty, so we are back. We are all finished up with our side panel. We have it on both sides, so this is one of my side panels, and this is my other, and as you guys can see, I got one of my seams all finished up as well. Now what we're all going to want to do is start with a single crochet row from one end, working up to the waistband, and then down the other end. And we're going to want to do that with our secondary color yarn. So we're all going to start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out and right side up, meaning the seam that we have for the waistband is along the outside, that's right side out, and we're all going to insert our hook into our stitch marker stitch. Now we're all going to want to make sure that our waistband is to the left and making sure that our side seam is right in the middle of our 2 panels that we have for our shorts. We're going to start with this one and insert our hook into the stitch marker stitch, and then just put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Once we reach this last stitch over here, hop over to the side panel and then continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch until we don't have any more left. We want to make sure that we're doing it this way so that we show the front of the single crochet so that it looks a lot cleaner. So just to do the first one, let's insert our hook into that stitch marker stitch, insert our secondary color yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch. We should have the same amount of stitches as our last side row, and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch into the side panel as well. Again, we should have the same amount of stitches on both of our panels, and then I'll meet you back. Alrighty, so we are back. We have just finished up our single crochet row with our secondary color yarn, and now we're going to seam it up, doing the same seam that we did for the waistband. So we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and then we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both of our panels. So I'm just going to take my hook out, insert it into this first single crochet, and then into my working yarn, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now let's do our first outside loop slip stitch seam. We're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Find that first stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And that's it. We are going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do not do a chain up of 1 and cut. I will meet you back because we're going to want to secure this seam into the waistband. Alright, so our seam is all finished up and we're going to want to make sure that this is connected into the waistband because we don't want this primary color to interrupt this seam with the waistband. So once we're worked into that last stitch, we're all going to chain 1 that's going to kind of act as a little bridge to hop over that primary color yarn. And then this portion is going to be completely up to you. We're just going to find any stitch that's directly on top of our seam and then insert our hook in through there. So just insert your hook underneath, making sure we're working into the waistband, that stitch, and through the other side, just like that. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. And now it's nice and secure into the waistband. And then from here, just chain 1 and cut. Then we're going to repeat everything we just did here on the other side, but because we still want to show the front of the single crochets working on the other side, we're going to first insert our hook into our side panel and then repeat. So the single crochet and then our seam that's connected into the waistband. Then from here, we're going to repeat everything we just did here on the other side, and I'll meet you guys back. Alrighty, so now that our side panels are seamed up to our shorts, we're now ready to get started on our inner thigh connector. Now I already have one of mine done, so let's do the following one together. So what we're all going to want to do is try on our shorts. We're going to make sure that we're placing our waistband where we want them to sit once when they're finished. So high-waisted, mid-rise, or low-rise, that's completely up to you. Then we're going to make sure that our side panels are along the side. And then counting from the bottom of our shorts, we're going to count up an odd number of stitches where we want the middle connector to be. So I've inserted my stitch marker into the 9th stitch from the bottom. That's roughly 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters. And I made sure to do that within the front and the back panel as well. And now from here, we're going to insert our hook into our stitch marker stitch and then just do our single crochet in 2 mesh stitch rows until this can connect to the back of the shorts. So like I said, we're all going to start by inserting our hook into our stitch marker stitch into one of our panels. It doesn't quite matter which one. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, making sure that it's the same primary color yarn to make sure that it matches. Pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then we're going to do a single crochet row all the way down. So starting with that same stitch that our chain 1 is in, or that stitch marker stitch, insert with your first single crochet, and we're going to continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch. And we will be leaving our side rows that we have along the bottom of our shorts because we're going to be single crocheting along the bottom of this one so we're finished as well. So our single crochet row is finished up. Our following row is going to be a mesh stitch row, so we already know how to do that. All we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, single crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the following. At the end of that row, it's going to be another mesh stitch row, then continue to repeat our single crochet and 2 mesh stitch rows until we have a portion that can stretch along your inner thigh to the back panel. And we do want to make sure that we're ending right after an even number row, so along the top so that we can seam it all together. I am back. My inner thigh connector is all finished up. I have a total of 12 rows, and this is roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And now we're going to single crochet seam it to the back of our pant leg. So we're all going to start by making sure that our work is flipped wrong side out now, meaning all of the seams that we have are flipped along the inside. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the stitch marker stitch that we have along the back panel. So all I'm going to do is insert my hook into my stitch marker stitch, then place my middle connector working yarn onto my hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do a single crochet seam. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and then single crochet around everything. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And when we don't, I will meet you guys back so that we can single crochet along the bottom of this portion as well. Alright, so our single crochet seam is all finished up. Now we're going to need to single crochet along the bottom of our middle connector to make our single crochet with our secondary color yarn a little bit cleaner. So we're going to chain 1 and flip our work right side out so that we can do our single crochet row. So all we're going to do is put one single crochet into every side row. We should end up with the same amount of single crochets as side rows that we made. So for me, 12. And then when we make our way all the way across, we're just going to slip stitch it into that first single crochet that we have along the bottom of our pant leg. Then do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then we're going to repeat everything we just did here on the other side. So we've just finished up our middle connector for both of our pant legs. Now everything is pretty much separated. Now we're just going to need to single crochet along the bottom of our side panels, again to make it easier for our single crochet row with our secondary color yarn. So all we're going to do is insert our hook into the first side row that we have within the side panel, then inserting our primary color yarn onto your hook, just one single crochet into every stitch. When we don't have any more side rows left to work into, just do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Alrighty, so we are back. We have just finished up single crocheting along the bottom of our side panels on both sides, and now we're going to seam up our piece. So we're going to flip our work wrong side out, making sure that the inner thigh seam is now faced along the outside. Now from here, we're going to insert our same 5.5mm hook into the 2 stitches that we have that's nearest to where our right and left pant leg split into our secondary color single crochet row. Then with our secondary color yarn, we're going to start with our single crochet seam. We are going to insert our yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now from here, let's just do the first seam since we already know how to do this. We're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert your hook. Insert your hook into that first stitch into the back panel, insert in through there, and then single crochet around everything, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we reach our middle connector, and then I'll meet you guys back so I can show you how we're going to do that as well. Alright, so we are back. We've just made our way down with our single crochet seam, and now we're at the top of our inner thigh connectors. So all we're going to do is the same single crochet seam, but we're going to be putting one single crochet into every side row since we don't have any actual stitches to work into. This is my top loop. I'm going to insert my hook in through there within the front panel, and then finding our first side row within the back panel. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop and single crochet. Let's do that again. Find the top loop within the front panel, insert, find the top loop within the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And we're going to continue this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, we're going to have more stitches. So just continue on with our single crochet seam, working our way back up our shorts. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, just slip stitch into the stitch right on top of the separated pant legs, making sure it's worked into our primary color single crochet row. When we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, we are back. Our shorts are all seamed up, and now the last thing we're going to do is single crochet along the bottom with our secondary color yarn to tie in all the piping. So we're all going to start by inserting our 5.5mm hook into any one of the stitches that we have along the inner thigh connector, and then we're going to start with a single crochet row with our secondary color yarn, making our way all the way down. Now once we reach our piping, I'll meet you guys back just to make sure that everything is all tied in. So we're back. We have just single crocheted our way all the way down. We're now at our piping, and now what we're going to do is just insert our hook into that first stitch that we have into our side seam, and just do one single crochet into there. And that's how we make sure that everything is all connected. And then from here, just find our first single crochet on the other side, and then continue on with our single crochet row. We're going to continue this, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space. Then just repeat everything we did here on the other side. Alrighty, so we are back. Our single crochet row along the bottom of our shorts are all finished up. Now the last thing we're going to have to do is just make a chain that's long enough to wrap around our waist for our drawstring. So I've already made mine. Mine is a chain of 135. Then I'm just going to show you guys how I'm going to be inserting my drawstring, but you guys can use whatever tools you like. All I'm going to do is take my 5mm hook, and I'm taking my 5 because I use that for the waistband. And I'm going to start by tracing my shorts seam all the way up into my waistband and just kind of eyeball where that middle row is. Now this is where my middle row is, and all I'm going to do is insert my hook into any one of the stitches where I want my drawstring to be. So it can be in the middle, along the top, or along the bottom. I'd like for mine to be in the middle. And just insert my hook into that same stitch, working my way all the way across until I reach my middle row. Once my hook is into place, I'm going to place my chain on top of my hook and pull it all the way through. And I'm going to continue to pull all the way through, leaving just a little bit of slack for the tie once we make our way all the way around. And then just continue this, making our way all the way around until we reach our middle row again. And now that our drawstring is all finished up, we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all in the next one. Bye!